Well, hello, fam. Today we have Jaton White and Julius Eromosele with us. We are so excited to have y'all both here. Will you both please share with the number one audience in the world, our capacity builders, a little bit more about yourselves?
Yes, Jaton White here. I'm going to be bold and brief in my introduction, and happy to be here. But I am the Director of Community Wellness at the Northside Achievement Zone and ready to engage in this conversation today.
Hey, learning community. My name is Julius Eromosele. I am the lead principal at Hopkins North Middle School, and it is a pleasure to be here with y'all.
Welcome to today's episode. When you have a personal goal or objective, do you focus on the outcome, like getting that objective, or do you focus more on the process, the how to get there? Let's discuss on today's episode. Jaton and Julius, thank you guys so much for your introduction. Thank you for being here. I am so excited about this conversation. Listeners, in full disclosure, I met Julius's wife first. That's how I got contact with Julius. Alexis, his wife, was working at the time at General Mills, and I do a lot of work with General Mills. And so through that, got to become friends with Alexis because she's super cool. And Julius got access to the information and thought it would apply to the school and the work that they do. So I have had now the last couple of years the honor of working at the school where Julius is a principal. So I have to stop and give a shout out to Hopkins North Middle School. Woohoo! The teachers there are amazing. They are capacity builders. This is a group of teachers. Every time I'm there, they are leaning in and trying to gain new awareness and building their capacity and showing up with that capacity. So shout out to them.
That's what's up. Okay, so Jody, like before you go on though, I'm going to answer the questions today.
All right.
You always asking these questions.
And you always asking to clarify them. So I'm excited that you're answering it.
Well, when I have a personal goal, I tend to focus primarily on the process, right? Once I've declared the goal. So with my professional goals though, I tend to first find like a coach or a mentor to know what it feels like in that area before I hop in. So I guess my question to you is like, why did you ask? Oh no, you know what? Before you answer, I want to ask you, Jason, what do you feel like? What do you feel about the objective or the goal? Like, what do you focus on?
Yeah, I focus on the process also.
Really, that's so interesting that both of you do that.
Yeah. Well, if you just focus on the goal, it seems too big or impossible. But if you break it down and focus on the process, you can identify, for me anyway, where I maybe need support in getting to the goal, where I may need some mentoring in getting to the goal. And then I get to celebrate along the way. I don't have to wait to the getting to the goal to celebrate. I can celebrate along the way. So I'd rather focus on the process.
And that piece is so huge because I find when I focus on the goal itself, like I say this, I'm a big boned girl. Okay, have been my whole life. My bones have gotten bigger and smaller throughout the stages of my life. It just depends which picture, which stage. Okay, and so there's been goals or objectives to like, oh, let's have a little smaller bone, But when I focus on that, it's bones, girl, it's bones. When I focus on that, the minute that the scale doesn't go the direction I want, it's a wrap. It's like, yeah, it's self-sabotage. I mean, that starts forget it, blah, blah, blah. So it's so interesting that you two would focus on the process. And the reason, listeners, I bring this up is because I was talking with Julius and he was talking about when he's asked as a principal, what are your academic goals? That he often brings up, well, equally important, or even maybe more so, is my cultural goals, right? And so I wanted to have you talk more about that, and so I want to for the listeners, to apply this personally, but then apply it to the institutions that you represent. And again, we were taking education in this episode as our institution. So applying this question to our goals within the educational system. And a lot of times, the academic goals is what is at people's forefront. Right. And so when Julius was saying, yeah, I often respond to people, well, let me tell you about my cultural goals, and how about we talk about that and put that at the forefront. I was like, oh, that's a twist. I don't hear that much when I'm working with educators. It's all about what are your academic goals and are you meeting them? They want to show you the results or if they're good or bad. So tell us, why is that your focus? What is that about for you, Julius?
No, absolutely. And as most people know, if you're working anywhere, you're asked to be like goal oriented and results oriented.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And in education, that's no different. We actually, our result is what we sell to people. If you buy a house in the neighborhood,
That's a must.
people will ask you,
go.
hey, what school district is that?
Right.
You know, what are the test scores? Like those are the things that people are often seeking out in the
Yes.
information they're going for. And that is all well and good, and that is really important,
Yeah.
right? But the crux of the matter is, in order to get those academic goals,
Come on, talk about it.
oftentimes you have to make sure that the conditions to get those academic goals are right. And
That's
that
so
means,
crucial.
in essence,
The culture.
the people, the culture who are supposed to be the ones who build up to that high capacity for the kids, right?
Yeah.
You know, are okay and have everything they need. Like, I think if you think of a school as a greenhouse, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? Where you're gonna have all kinds of different plants. They require different kinds of like
Yeah.
needs and attention,
I like it.
right?
True.
But the temperature needs to be right
Come
in
on.
order for it to grow. It can't be cold outside, and cold in the greenhouse,
Right.
Yeah.
right? It
Yeah.
can't be super hot outside and super hot in the greenhouse. Somehow the conditions have to be met. And, you know, and Dr. Anthony Mohammed, you know, talks about the idea of like, you know, our goals, we plant them in the soil of culture, right? As
Ooh,
educators.
Hold it. We got to say that again.
You know.
Our goals, we plant them in the soil of the culture.
Yeah.
That's
That's good.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
So, you know, and so as a leader, you know, I when I meet with our families, you know, I talk to them about, you know, we have these goals, right? We want your kids to attain this full capacity which is the reason you're choosing us. And we're all well and ready to do that for you. But we also think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is all of the needs of the kids that come before that full ascension. You know,
Right.
They have to feel safe, right? And that's no different for the adults. The adults have to feel safe in that
Teachers,
space,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know, they have to feel valued.
Yeah.
Adults have to feel that same way. And
Yes.
so once we can get through all of that, then we can start having technical conversations about what it takes to attain those high scores that make buying a house in a certain neighborhood more attractive to other people, right?
Right.
So for me, I am learning that when we present a goal academically, that we don't forget to go back. It's almost back.
What's the soil?
Right, exactly.
What's the soil? That's nice that this one plant grew, but what's the soil for everyone?
For everyone,
Yeah.
right? And you have to
Ooh, that's
backwards
good.
plan.
Yeah,
You know?
Yeah.
the conditions of soil.
And
that's
this is
that's
good.
life, right?
Juicy.
That's life giving. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
go
and-
ahead, Jaton. Like, okay, so
Yeah,
That- that's what
yeah.
now-
Listen, I'm trying not to get excited over here because y'all know I'm Farmer Jaton from this moment on in our life, and you've been doing a lot of homework on the science of soil and the microbial life and the fungus life. All those things have to be, the conditions have to be right. And if you're doing an indoor greenhouse, the air, the humidity has to be right. The VPD, the vapor, how much can your plants take in? Right? If you got this high temperature,
Yeah.
and your humidity's all out of whack, your plants there's no life happening.
Not at all.
Right? And so we all have to be mindful, is what I'm hearing you say, when we take that step back, to go back and make sure, are the conditions still right as we move forward? And
Absolutely.
we have to do that more often than not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
and
And
from
then-
your experience with the teachers, right,
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
also work with in,
Yeah,
in your,
we-
in your work at NAS.
Yeah, through NAS, so we're saying some of the same things, right? We're saying in organizations, and we talked about this before, a school is an organization, it's a business. It has a bottom line, there's some things that need to be done. And organizations tend to think that culture is set from the top of the organization down, and it's absolutely not. And that's kind of why we're in across the country, kind of in the disarray we're in as far as most organizations. Culture is about the people that come into the organization. You hire or you have volunteered to do a particular type of task or job. Those people come with some lived experience. They come with some education,
Oh,
right?
come
So they
on.
have some
Come on,
degrees
sis.
or some experience in those
Absolutely.
spaces. So they're specialists at most times, but they also carry with them the life experiences they don't share out loud. Right? And that becomes, unfortunately and annoyingly, part of a culture
Yes.
in an organization.
Absolutely.
So by taking this step back and forth, this delicate dance, a waltz, I call it, is in your scenario though, you're organically going, hey, that worked for 90% of the kids, but this 10%, let's dance a little bit. Let's figure out what we need to put in the soil. Do we need to amend the soil? Do we need to water more? Do we need to hire somebody to come tend to it more hours of the day than we have?
Absolutely.
Right, so you organically just embed that, and then that becomes culture. And then what happens is it happens in classrooms, right?
Absolutely.
Teachers will begin to ask kids different questions, so they present what their ideas and thoughts are what needs to be in the soil, and that's when we'll have real education.
Absolutely.
Right? Teachers will be liberated, kids will be liberated.
And the more that we have that awareness ourselves,
Yeah.
when we have that conversation, the more
Yes.
individuals who have awareness of their own experiences and are showing up with some capacity
Yeah.
to listen, oh, hey, why, really hold that space for why aren't we reaching those 10
That's right.
kids?
That's right.
But having awareness that I don't know all the experiences and what are their experiences and what are we doing that is working and isn't for them.
Yeah.
That piece. Right. When you guys are talking, and Julius, we've talked about this before, when you've talked about the culture, the emphasis on it, it immediately made me think about when No Child Left Behind went through. And whatever people thought of that, and I'm dating myself, I was there. But what I noticed is it was so interesting because I was working with schools and consulting with them, is some schools, when No Child Left Behind passed, they just taught to the test. Like they were goal and objective oriented, like, oh, we just got to get this, and this. I mean, here's what they said, and now we've got to teach to it, and here's what we got to do. So much so that, as you guys know, we had schools who cheated, who literally helped students cheat so that they could get those scores. And I don't want to pass that judgment. I want to have that emphasis, like you said, when we buy houses, schools, your score is up there. I mean, it impacts the whole neighborhood and who wants to purchase a house and all of that. So I understand the pressure that schools were under. And when they're under that pressure, for some schools, they're like, hey, we're just going to focus on the goal and the objective and go. To the degree, if we're not meeting it, we might even think about cheating, and some did. Then I saw schools who said, okay, this is your goal and objectives. We got it. Got it. Everybody's got it. Okay, we got it. Now, and they almost put it to the side and they focused on the process. And I remember I worked with some schools where they just sat down and said, what do we know about the human body and the brain? What does it have to learn? What are things we scientifically know? And teachers know, teachers start going, well, we know that it has to be hydrated. Like something so simple. It's like, yeah, brain is, made up of water. We know that you fed. If you're not fed that day, I'm not listening. I mean, if I'm not fed in a couple hours, I'm not listening. You know what I mean? Honestly, come on now. Might be why I have big bones, but that's for another conversation, okay? And then they just started making that list. They have to feel, we know humans have to feel a level of safety, and that looks different for everybody. Yeah. They have to have a connection. And so then when they started listing what humans needed, they said, okay, well, from the time we have interaction with a student, how are we creating a culture that has all of those elements? Because if we create, I'll go back to yours, the greenhouse that feels safe, that has the amount of water and food and people feel connected, we believe in the phrase came, trust the process, believe in the process. Right. And so we believe that we'll get that. And what I found is the schools that really focused on the process, not only did they make some of the largest gains, but to this day they sustained them. That's where we're seeing the schools that have been able to sustain their impact were oftentimes the ones that focused on that process. So when you had talked about, I really want to answer that with yes, and it's not about academics aren't important. It's just about let's talk about the culture first. Right. Because if we have the right culture, then we're going to trust that learning will occur. And so flipping that for people is, I think, so important.
Let me jump in, right? Because I think, the point you made about sustainability for whatever that goal is, right? It's not enough to just get there one good time. Yeah. Right. And then, because think about it, in schools, right? We constantly have new grades coming in, right?
Well, I'm going to interrupt you and say, because I have lost weight one good time, many good times, right? Let's be honest. We can achieve something one good time, but keep going. I'm so sorry. How do we sustain it?
Because if I walk into classrooms to do formal and informal observations, right? Every teacher teaches differently. Absolutely. And one day you're on, another day you're not. Because, you know, maybe you got in a fight with your significant other before you came to work today. You're going to have a regular day today.
Right.
But tomorrow, you ate your Wheaties. You're going to be on today.
Yeah.
And kids are going to go, oh, Mr. So-and-so's got it today. He's striking. He's making us laugh. He's giving us great examples. I am loving this, right? And so, but in order to have that level of like, you know, continual hitting the mark and make it sustainable, for each grade that comes in, which is determined by the year you were born, which is random, right?
That's another episode too. We got a lot of shoot-off episodes.
So
Yeah.
that you have to create an atmosphere and a culture where people understand how they need to show up and what is required for them showing up, and that is more controlled. You can better control that than just, you know, because every kid too, right? Like the idea that everyone has to hit a certain marker is a whole nother conversation for kids, right? But the fact is, what success looks like for individuals can be very different academically, right?
Absolutely.
And at different times.
And at different times. So how do we as educators create a space that gives each kid what it is they need, personalizing their own success?
Which is perfect, because this is a perfect segue into, Julius. A lot of times we love to be able to give our capacity builders tools, right? So when you all are thinking of these, I mean, as you are speaking of this, like you and Jaton, like what are some of the tools that you feel we could give our audience around that?
And I'm going to let them think about it by talking and answering something of that, is the teachers, to understand the pressure on a teacher, because like you said, we show up with, some days I show up with capacity, you know, full capacity, and sometimes I show up with low capacity. You know, teachers, oh, they're human, you know, and the pressures then for the way the current system is that we say by a certain age you should be doing these things, when we know every student is on their own journey. Like to ask my third grader that I have right now, he to ask him to read at third grade level, it has nothing to do with his teachers. His teachers have been amazing. It has everything to do with this is where he is developmentally. He'll get there, but it ain't gonna be by third grade. But how then that all of a sudden people can look at that like, oh, that teacher and that school system aren't making their goals. Well, it turns out they're doing amazing work, but it's just that student is on that journey. And so I just want to, as we talk about tools, put that into that big systemic realm or way of thinking, that we can give individual tools and even tools that an institution can use, but we also have to look at the system and how it's measuring and the pressures that come with that, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
It's definitely layered.
Oh yeah, there you
Definitely
go.
layered.
Yeah, layered. Thank you. Yeah, you would have said that like 5 minutes ago. I would have saved the listeners a lot of time. Thank you. Yes.
Perfect time.
Yeah, there you go. But for you guys, what are tools to build that culture? And I know some of the things I want to highlight that I've worked with Julius' school on, but what are things that you guys, how do
I'll
you build
start
that?
because I definitely want to be very attentive when you talk, especially today, Julius, on this question, because I want to learn, because you're running a school and I'm supporting people who run schools and people who are in the schools. So I'm going to keep it simple, because if we, and that's one of the things I'm going to say, keep it simple, right? We all work for institutions. I happen to work for one that's a nonprofit organization. That's an institution. It has a foundational concepts that actually should go against everything in my moral fiber as a Black person, right? And so there's some tension points there. And so acknowledging that there's some tension points when I work in an organization that already has a systematic foundation, right? It's not something you built for yourself. And so, you know, if I built this for myself, there'd be all these accommodations. So don't expect that people are going to just throw in accommodations for you, right? So what I'm saying, and the reason I say that is you have to figure out what it is you actually need. Teachers get into teaching to teach, to educate, right?
Yes.
They want to work with scholars. Not once during their journey, you correct me if I'm wrong, does anyone say, hey, you should also consider taking care of yourself. Your mental health, physical health, and spiritual health are just as important as this learning. Also, I would encourage teachers to find out, because you're not some of the simple developmental milestones of children are also not taught to teachers. Right, we're just teaching to the job, and we're asking teachers to be teachers. I would encourage anybody in education, including the building engineers. Right, those are the most important people in building. If you ask
always
me,
say
right?
that.
They are.
They are, though. They are. That's true.
They are.
So
Get yourself some
So
access to developmentally appropriate materials or training, so that when kids are making transition in pivotal years, especially kindergarten to first grade, going to middle school and then going to high school, you understand what you might be seeing, so you know how to ask for help because you don't have the right tools in your classroom, and save yourself the frustration, right? And then the most small thing you can do is get yourself a wellness plan.
Yeah.
Get yourself a wellness
you're big on
plan.
that.
Yeah. What needs to be in that wellness plan? I'm not going to dictate what it needs to look like. Then take that wellness plan, especially if you're in education, to your school leader so they know how to help you.
Absolutely.
Right? That would be my couple of 2 cents, but I'm really excited to see what you're going to add.
And honestly, everything you said is spot on. And I think the one point, I don't even know if it's a tool, but it's certainly a point of emphasis for me as a leader, builds off of what you were just talking about going to your leader and, like, what is the thing you need, right? And communicating that. And so I would say the point I try to kind of hone in on with our staff and try to have this culture, have it permeate through our entire building, is the culture of, like, vulnerability without judgment.
There you go. That's
That's
huge.
good.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
Vulnerability without
That's
judgment. Because
That's
here's the thing,
big.
and that's why we need a Jody, honestly, right? Because we all have a different story to tell,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I need to feel like you're willing to hear the story I got to tell. Whether you can relate to it or not,
Just let me tell it.
that story is my story, and I need somebody to hear it. And the minute I feel like it's been heard, and I can go, all right, I'm good to go.
good. Yeah,
I'm gonna take care of the
yeah,
kids,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so as leaders, we have to model that in a way that allows people to be who they are authentically, but also you have to drop your guard as a leader and show that same vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And then allow them to practice not judging you for who you are, right? Because then they have to go model that in the classroom with kids who don't look, sound, or have the same experiences
I
at
love
them.
it.
You know what I mean? So that's just one of those things where when working and doing human work, we have to become even more human.
Yes.
And so it's, I don't mean to simplify it. That's the way I tend to just try to focus in. And that means interacting in ways that, that are meaningful. Like, I have this thing I do, depending whether I'm talking to an adult or a kid, if I feel like it's a tough conversation, but I can't convey to them just how much I need them to relax, I go, how about this? We'll just go for a walk.
Yes. Yes.
We're gonna walk through the hallway.
Yeah.
That way we can just talk, and then your body has something to do.
Yes.
Well, brain
Yeah.
research, yes.
Yeah.
I can't escalate if I'm focused on throwing a ball or focused on walking. I mean, that again goes back to that awareness that you talked about, is understanding development, understanding the brain. That's a simple, but it's
Profound.
Yes,
it's
it's
profound. And I
huge.
like the way, I love that you said you don't want to make it simple, but making it that simple allows for people that space.
Yeah.
So I love that you make it simple.
Yeah.
Sometimes
One year
we just
I'm
need to
sorry.
be simple.
It does.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
as you say that, it reminds me of a time where I used to do Friday fun days with kids, but there were a lot of kids experiencing a lot of behavior issues for a variety of different reasons. So I started with first grade one year, and by the time the end of the school year came, Miss Benice Young, hey Benice, said, I need you to better organize Friday Fun Day, because I had kids from all over. And the rule was you just had to do your job every single day. By the time, so Friday it'd be 5 kids, the next Friday was 10 kids, and it was 20 kids, and it was 30 kids, and I was like, oh Lord, I need somebody to help me in here. There's a lot of kids.
because they were doing what they needed,
They needed to
during
do
the week.
just to get to front. If Friday Fun Day was 15 minutes. It was just 50. It was right before the end of the school day. Just to kind of get the wiggles out, I was doing twofold. One, I'm rewarding you for doing your job.
Yeah.
Right.
2, I'm settling you down before you get on this bus for the bus driver.
Right. Help 'em
Right?
out. Yeah.
And I'm giving the teachers a moment to kind of get you guys prepared to leave for the weekend. So, and it was fun, but it got a little bit out of control. But it was this simple thing about, I do want you to do your job. And I know doing your job is hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, Mom, you might have woke up late and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and it's hard to have empathy with the student if we don't feel that our principals or we're in a culture that is also understanding that our job is hard as a teacher.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so
Right.
that's where I love the whole cultural is like we got to look at the entire environment. Are we creating that space where I can be vulnerable? And that's, I just want to give a shout out to Hopkins North Middle School. The last time I was there, we were talking about collective community. And that collective community means that we have to have a level of trust. We have to have a level of safety. We have to be willing to lean in, because if we can provide that to each other, then we can show that to our students more frequently, and we can give that to them, which starts to change the culture. I like what you said. It makes it human first, not just, you know, a test score first, and that those things are they intersect. You know, if we change that culture, those test scores are, you know, are going to see improvement. So it's not about, again, either or. It's that both and. Yeah. But where do we put our focus?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good, y'all. This was a phenomenal episode. Joe, do you want to go ahead and summarize it up?
You
for
know
us?
it. So I don't know, listeners, I wrote down so many notes. And think about us for ourselves personally as well as professionally. When we have goals and objectives, are we just focusing on them and those deadlines and just wreaking havoc on our own body because we're so stressed out over it? Or are we looking at the process, like sitting down once I got a goal and objective, what are the things that I need in place to have that happen, but have it happen in a way that is, you know, productive for my mind and my body? And so I love the whole keeping it simple. I love the having a wellness plan. Yeah. We all need a wellness plan. And gaining more awareness. You had talked about, Julius, and you talked about with the development. I think that's so crucial, because once I understood more for myself about how trauma is held in my body and how it shows up, that created a whole different path to how I ate and how I looked at food. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't just want pizza that day. I had gotten activated, and there was a reason I wanted 4 slices, you know, I mean, being able to process that. And then vulnerability without judgment. Are we creating those spaces? That's huge. I think, and that vulnerability without judgment means we have to have some awareness. It's really hard to be vulnerable if we don't have awareness ourselves. And so if we gain, the more awareness we gain, I think the more we can show up and be vulnerable. No matter who we are, I love what you said, as leaders, we have to allow people to practice. So that means we got to show up vulnerable and allow them to either receive it or not. And then the last one is, you know, just to be more human. You know, it's creating that environment. Are we allowing people to be human, or are we working so hard towards that goal? And I know when I work with corporations, this is so interesting because it's so goal-oriented. And man, people are sometimes just so focused on that goal. I just want to go, guys, are y'all human? You know what I mean? Because they're just like, no, well, how does that da-da-da, and da-da-da. And they're just, I'm like, okay, take a breath and let's just, how are you? And they'll look at me like, what? Fine. No, let's talk about you, but bringing that humanness into it so that we can do that. But I love, thank you guys so much. And we're going to have you two on another episode. So thank you guys.
Well, thank you, Julius, Eromosele, and Jaton White, for joining us here today. This, again, like Jody said, was amazing. And this is us, capacity builders, building capacity in ourselves, in our community, and in our institutions. Thank you for spending your time with us today, and we'll see you soon.